Thank you for the honor to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, the post-war discussion on the phenomenon of consciousness in the philosophy of mind and in the cognitive sciences was characterized by one thing above all else. It was an instructive dead end. In view of this, many Catholic scholars are tempted to put the hard metaphysical question of our time: can AIs develop consciousness? In brackets. Instead, they focus on challenges that threaten human dignity in a more obvious manner: social, labor, economic, and cultural issues. If we succumb to this temptation, we will lose sight of the greatest threat, the threat of the cognitive dignity of man. The most striking signs of this threat include the decline of our ability to engage with cognitive frictions and ambiguities, and the loss of critical thinking. Empirical research highlights the significance of these signs, where people rely on AI to solve tasks that previously required a sustained cognitive effort. The gradual erosion of attention, memory, imagination, and ethical reasoning can be observed. The relevant erosions display disturbing similarities to the phenomenon of cognitive atrophy, long known in cognitive psychology. Colloquially, this phenomenon is also called brain rot. This should give Catholics pause of thought. When Pope Leo XIII addressed the challenges of industrialization in Rerum Novarum, he had every reason to shine a spotlight on the dignity of the worker. The fact that God had become a craftsman or carpenter in Jesus Christ could not fail to shape the way workmanship was viewed in the industrial age. Pope Leo XIV builds on this teaching when he reminds us in his exhortation Dilexit Te of last week: by working, we become a fuller person. Our humanity flourishes. It is a participation in God's work of creation that continues every day, also thanks to the hand, mind, and the heart of the work. If we build on this tradition, we must face the fact that the Industrial Revolution has entered a new state: the industrialization and commodification of human knowledge. As is well known, the Aristotelian tradition distinguished between intrinsically valuable theoretical and practical activities on the one hand, and in extrinsically motivated acts of making, such as craftsmanship. The tradition of Catholic social teaching cautiously relativized this dualism, yet only today has become clear that it has lost its plausibility completely. The proletarianization of the worker, diagnosed by Karl Marx in the 19th century, has expanded to the point where every cognitive act is at risk at losing its dignity. We are faced with the challenge of a generalized proletarianism. This leads me back to the phenomenon of cognitive dignity. Pope Leo in Dilexit Te touches on this value in connection with the experience of moral, spiritual, and cultural poverty. On the one hand, knowledge forms our heart by teaching people to think and promote dignity in the light of the unity of goodness, beauty, and truth. On the other hand, knowledge is a fundamental requirement for the recognition of human dignity. Yet the experience of moral, spiritual, and cultural poverty has become endemic. And this means we need to face the hard metaphysical question of our time more uncompromisingly than ever before. What distinguishes vital intelligence from the industrialized intelligence of machines? We are embodied, relational, and affective creatures that interact with their physical and socio-cultural environment in a responsive way. Where these potentials wither away, we lose our cognitive dignity. Pope Francis has pinpointed the core of this challenge when he wrote in his encyclical letter Dilexit Nos: in this liquid world of ours, people risk losing that center, the center of themselves. No room is left for the heart. Francis' emphasis on the wisdom of the heart reminds us of an old age tradition that is still valid today. Human consciousness is not located in the brain, but in the heart. To be more precise, consciousness cannot be localized spatially. If localizable at all, it is associated with the organ of temporal duration, the organ of our sense of rhythm and attunement. The challenge to recover the vital dynamic of attuned cognition becomes particularly evident in the light of post- and transhumanist narratives that promote the emergence of a techno-scientific algoclasty, the idolatrous veneration of mechanic algorithms. Against this background, the theoretical and practical challenges of the 20th century can be placed at the intersection of the following two lines. Line one, if we take seriously the latest biological and neurocognitive research on the unity of lived and calculating intelligence, there is no technical path to constructing machines endowed with consciousness. The architecture of silicon-based mechanical computers is not able to compete with forms of plant, animal, or human intelligence as decision-making or even judgment-making agents. The opposing science fiction narratives that have been on the way of creating artificial intelligences that surpass humans is logically incoherent and owes its credibility to conceptually confused descriptions of phenomena in the mentioned post-war period. The phenomenon of human intelligence was not grasped as a vital reality in this period, but denied or marginalized, only to subsequently be declared an illusion or treated as an epiphenomenon. However, enormous progress has been made in the past decade. Today, we are undoubtedly on the way to creating enormously powerful extensions of human intelligence. However, there's not the slightest danger that we will create a super intelligence that could rightly claim to treat humans as inferior beings. Star Trek narratives of this type present us with the responsibility to demystify the scientific aura of transhumanist storytelling. Later, obscure our realistic sense of human capabilities, weaknesses, responsibilities, and vulnerability. Hence, it is our moral duty to expose the conceptual confusion and irrational metaphysical background assumptions of outdated computer anthropology. It is our duty to disguise them as the obscene flotsam of a dead end in the history of philosophy and science. This demand is at the heart of the 10 rules for a digital world, which, inspired by the biblical 10 commandments, have been made public by the Future Foundation, a group of well-respected academics and professionals 1 month ago. The second rule says, do not wrongly attribute humanity to machines. This conflict line is intertwined with a second challenge, the pandemic of our idolatrous practices of veneration and work. The anthropological roots of this problem have been known, for example, among people who build aeroplanes and train their pilots. The relevant specialists call it automation bias. Pilots tend to trust in machines more than in humans and are inclined to compare themselves with their mechanical double. Since this is highly dangerous, future pilots are trained to overcome this bias. However, the modern automation bias is also highly dangerous in our social, political, and cultural life. The progressive assimilation of human intelligence to machine intelligence creates the illusion of autonomous control at the very moment when everything gets out of control. Let me shortly outline how this challenge is intertwined with the first, the idolatrous myth of intelligent machines. Similar to the ink on a sheet of paper, the electronic market on silicon chips can provide us with powerful extensions of human intelligence. But they are not intelligent in themselves. The relevant, spatially configured sequences of physical marks become meaningful symbols or rational calculations only when we interpret them as being meaningful, logical, or rational. Anything else would entangle us in idolatrous act of narcissistic self-deception. We would confuse a deceptive simulacrum of mental activity with a mental act. To use the relevant philosophical terminology, we would confuse a meaning indifferent space of causation with a semantically qualified space of reasoning. The phenomena of temporality, intentionality, and creativity can help us to grasp the enormous gulf that separates these two spaces. Contemporary transformer technologies are capable of revealing connections between different problem areas that are previously unimaginable. Yet, they're always built on probabilistic correlations between data. By contrast, vital cognition is not primarily probabilistic. Only inattentive speakers choose their words on a probabilistic basis. If our use of language is rooted in our vital experience, it becomes idiomatic. It expresses a distinctive attitude towards the world that is shaped by unique biography and distinctive cultural and religious traditions. It expresses distinctive feelings and emotions, etc. Authentic expression of living intelligence can therefore be characterized by the following rule of thumb: less arbitrary or predictable they are, the more meaningful and expressive they become. And conversely, the more they follow probabilistic or randomized patterns like language models, the more meaningless they are. This disjunction follows from a perplexingly simple reason: we inhabit the realm of the living and not of the dead. Human language does not generate entropy. It actively seeks negentropy. It displays the ability to resist disorder and indifference. Artificial intelligences are incapable of doing so. They do not struggle with words or grope for the inexpressible, etc. Caring and striving is not the characteristic of their architecture. From a scientific point of view, this has a simple explanation. Artificial intelligences operate close to the thermodynamic equilibrium. They share this feature with convection currents in a pot of boiling water. It takes a lot of energy to get convection currents bubbling, but when you turn off the stove, the system disappears. Since its life is not at stake, it will never try to jump out of the water or to produce offspring. In other words, AIs are not temporal creatures that display an élan vital. Rather, their decisions are the result of discretely coded, spatially correlated data sets whose trajectory is determined by a discrete system state. When the life of a system matters, the situation is different. In this case, the principle of life takes on the character of a responsive action potential. The latter allows an open future to be transformed into a calculable and predictable future, but the élan vital of the system sets the tune. It awakens resonances that indicate what matters, thereby initiating a process of relevance realization. This process allows us to distinguish between life-affording and life-threatening circumstances, which increases the probability of survival, yet the probabilistic features of vital systems are not the cause, but an expression of their vitality. Like a melody, the élan vital of an organism connects its past, present, and future in a constant flow of movement that cannot be fixed or coded. By contrast, calculable discrete codes of action can only ever be expressed retrospectively. To use the formula of St. Augustine, unlike artificial intelligences, living systems are essentially distended in time. The gap that distinguishes self-aware living beings from inanimate machines is a consequence of this general principle of vital temporal flow. Following Henri Bergson, Maurice Merleau-Ponty described the most characteristic feature of aware beings as follows. Time is therefore myself. I'm the duration that I grasp, and in me it is duration that grasps itself. This leads me back to my starting point. Human intelligence has a dynamic core that is characterized by a complex set of features that are inextricably intertwined. Temporal duration, interiority, intentionality, self-awareness, freedom, and self-transcendence. This is why I'm torn between memories of my past self and the desire for yet unarticulated future self. And this is why my caring nature as a being that tirelessly transcends itself concerns not only myself, it also always concerns my relationship to other selves who inspire me to transcend myself. Pope Francis has reminded us of this dimension of our embodied existence when he emphasized quotation, the mysterious connection between self-knowledge and openness to others, between the encounter with one's personal uniqueness and the willingness to give oneself to others. Against this background, the fact that we are increasingly reliant on artificial intelligences draws our attention to the idolatrous inclination of our time, the inclination to create idols that turn us into lifeless images and heartless images, a copy of ourselves. Like expressed in Psalm 115 in biblical terms. So I want to conclude my statement by recalling the first of the 10 rules for a digital world. Do not elevate digital technology to an end in itself. Thank you for your attention.